Hey guys, Lucky here. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make the most powerful and epic Ice Mage you've played in any game before. It vacuums enemies in, it freezes them, and shatters them into pieces. If that sounds fun, let's talk about the gear and the skill tree setup that we use to make this build shine. Massive shout out to EA for sponsoring this video. Click the link and you can order Dragon Age the Veilguard now, out on PS5, Xbox Series X and S, PC, Steam, and the EA app. Now let's dive in. Alright, the first thing we should touch on is creating your character. You can pick any race except for the dwarf, because the dwarfs aren't allowed to be mages, so they're automatically disqualified, but anybody else can be a mage, so they're fine. And then of course you are going to choose the mage when you're given the option. And for your faction, we're going to go ahead and go with shadow dragons right here. And the reason we're picking shadow dragons is your class specific resource regenerates slightly faster. This is going to be helpful for regenerating our mana after we spend it, especially before we get some key passives. First, let's go ahead and take a look at our character sheet so we can see which skills we're using and why. We're going to be using Entropic Sphere. This is going to be our primary damage ability. And you can see here in the little image that shows up how small it is when you first get the ability. See that tiny little orb floating towards those guys? Okay, now look at the size of the orb that I have. Look at that. And it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And this thing does such insane damage. It hits everything on the screen because I've heavily invested in increasing its projectile damage as well as increasing the size of its area of effect. So that's our primary damage ability that we're unleashing at the beginning of every battle. It slows enemies and sucks them into it. So it's constantly doing mini stuns on the enemy so they can't fight back. So that is the first ability. That tiny little orb there turns into what we do when we've unlocked the skill tree the way we have. The next thing we're going to be doing is taking Frost Nova. I really like this ability because this is going to let you chain cast your spells over and over in combination with a couple of passives that we took. So this is being taken to freeze enemies, and then while they're frozen, we do more damage to them and they can't fight back. It's a nice combination. The next one is going to be Ice Blast. Ice Blast is going to be used for a couple of different reasons. One, it does really solid single target damage and great AoE damage as well. And two, it's going to apply weakened to the enemies, and then we can have one of our companions detonate that weakened effect on that enemy. So it's going to debuff the enemy and it's going to allow our companions to detonate that enemy if we would like to. Finally, for our ultimate, we are using Vortex of the Shadow. This is basically creating a black hole that slowly sucks all the nearby enemies into it and holds them into place. It's another really sizable dot that we can drop on the battlefield anytime we get up against a really thick enemy. And in conjunction with our abilities that we're using and our companions, we're going to be able to get this back really fast. So our basic rotation is usually going to be to suck the enemies in and damage them with Entropic Sphere, impale the one with the most health with the Ice Blast, and then freeze them in place so that we can refresh all the cooldowns by light attacking and start doing the rotation all over again before they even unfreeze. So when we do this rotation right, we can perma-freeze most enemies and bosses. And hey, if you're enjoying this video, be sure to like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Thank you. So let's take a look at the skill tree before we take a look at the armor here. When you first start, you're going to have these two abilities right here. It's going to be Destructive Light. This is going to be your ultimate. You're going to have to charge this up by attacking enemies with abilities like Arcane Shot, which is going to be your basic ability that you're going to start with. You're going to launch projectiles at the enemy here, just like that image shows, and that's going to be your primary form of damage when you first start. But what you're going to quickly do is work your way up to the Frost abilities that we're going to be using, primarily Frost Nova and Ice Blast here. So I recommend when you first start, because respecking is free, just come straight up here, work your way straight up to Frost Nova and then to Ice Blast, and just grab these abilities in the straightest path that you can. Once you have these two abilities, you're going to start grabbing anything that buffs them. One of the first ones you want to get here is Greater Authority. And what this one does is it's going to reduce your Frost Nova cooldown by 20 seconds. And also it's going to remove the mana cost of Ice Blast and make it an ability that you fire on cooldown. This is going to be great because early on in the game, you're going to run out of your resource for casting spells really fast. So making this ability a cooldown ability allows you to free cast your other ability, which is going to be Arcane Shot, over and over while the enemies are frozen and chilled here. You're going to grab this section here, grab all the passives here that are upgrading area abilities because your Frost Nova is an area ability. Grab all of the passives that say they're upgrading control abilities because these are both control abilities. You can see there it says type, control, and blast. So you want to grab any passive that improves control abilities or blast abilities. So area, control, blast. Those are the 3 types of nodes you're looking to grab. And then while you're doing that, you're going to work your way over here. And at level 30, you'll be able to grab your mastery and work your way into this tree over here. And this is when you'll have a really significant boost in your player power, because you will be unlocking Entropic Sphere. And this is going to be our primary ability. This is the one that we're going to make do ridiculous things, but you can't do that until 30. So until 30, you're just going to come up, you're going to grab these 2 abilities. You can temporarily grab Dark Squall if you'd like to. This is really nice single or double target damage. It's a really small AoE, but it is AoE. So if you get enough enemies really close together, it can hit multiple enemies and it does good damage. So don't be shy about using this one if you'd like to. It also has the ability to detonate Sundered, so it's a perfectly acceptable ability to use. If you want to go more offensive, you can sub this out and use it instead of Frost Nova. If you feel like Frost Nova is too defensive, you don't need it, you can replace Frost Nova with Dark Squall. And this will pair really nicely with our Entropic Sphere, because you'll notice Entropic Sphere is area and projectile damage, and Dark Squall is going to be projectile and control damage. So there's a lot of overlap in these abilities, which makes it real easy to grab passives that are upgrading all of them. Once you grab your Entropic Sphere, what you want to do is make sure you have as many area and projectile upgrades as possible. So this one right here, for example, it says upgrades projectile abilities. You would want that. This one down here, again, projectile abilities. You'll notice they have the same icon, so it makes it real easy to find all projectile ability upgrades. See, that one's like that little shard of ice, and that one's a shard of ice. So you kind of just hunt around the tree. You go, where's the next? Oh, there's one there too. Oh, that would be nice to have. And you work your way to it, grabbing those nodes. Those nodes are very impactful, very powerful. And without going over what every single node on this tree is doing, the gist of the passives that we've grabbed are increasing the size of our abilities. So the area of our Frost Nova ability is really massive. It freezes everything on our screen. The area of our Entropic Sphere is massive. It's hitting everything on the screen and therefore sucking everything in. And we've also increased projectile damage significantly. And we have a bunch of buffs to projectile abilities, where when those projectile abilities kill enemies or hit enemies, it's buffing us, it's giving us mana back, or helping us in some other way, right? There's a lot of synergies there. And then in this iteration of the build, we've also got 2 abilities that are on cooldown. But the nice thing about that is that cooldown doesn't matter when we get this passive over here, Quicken Strikes. The final staff attack reduces the cooldown of our abilities. So what we'll do is, let me see if I can go and get into some battle real quick. Here, we'll just put the abilities on cooldown, and then we'll do 3 light attacks. Watch the cooldown counter on those abilities. See what it did there? All of them went up. Here, I'll replay that real quick and focus on the number 2 and the number 3 ability down there. So that's what happens thanks to that passive that I was just talking about. All of our abilities that are on cooldowns basically get reset when we get that final attack off. The 3rd light attack in a row is considered the final light attack, and that's what's going to reset the cooldowns on our skills. So because we know we're constantly going to be doing chains of 3 light attacks, it behooves us to buff our light attacks, because that's basically what we're doing. We're dropping our 3 abilities, and then we're light attacking 3 times so that we can drop our abilities again. So if our light attacks are doing really good damage, that's really good for us. And that kind of segues us into why we chose the weapon we chose. This weapon is increasing our light attack damage by 20%. And then it's going to add an additional projectile to our final attack. That's why when I hit that enemy with my 3rd light attack, it deleted it. It's because this staff is increasing light attack damage while also adding more projectiles. The next passive on this one, final attacks with this weapon fire an additional projectile if you have at least 3 staff energy charges. And it's very easy to have 3 staff energy charges, just don't use your staff energy charges, right? Your staff energy charges, if you don't know, that right there is the staff energy charges. You can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4 of them at the moment. And to do a staff energy charge, you just have to do on PC. It's a shift click, so it looks like that. That's the charged attack. It uses my staff charges to cast that ability. I can get those charges back simply by light attacking enemies, and it'll fill that meter up again. So that's where, if you look at the last 3 lines of this one, they're all buffing the final attack, which I'm trying to use in my rotation. I do my 3 abilities, and then I light attack 3 times. It's a very, very simple rotation. There's nothing difficult about it. You just 1, 2, 3. There they go. And then you just light attack 3 times. Boom. Now, everything on cooldown will be reset, but you'll notice I don't have enough mana for my sphere again right away. I mean, it came back pretty fast, but in the heat of a battle of a boss fight, that would feel like an eternity waiting for that to be up again, because boss fights can move pretty fast in this game. So rather than waiting for my mana to come back, what I would do is I hold my block button and then I click my light attack button and it charges my mana all the way up. So I'll do that again. There we go. And you'll see it's charging really fast. My mana's going way up. Boom, I'm at full mana again, and my sphere isn't even gone. The only ability that's using mana to cast is still out. So now I could cast it again right away. So I have unlimited casts of that ability. I can have 100% uptime on that with this build, thanks to a passive that I grabbed on the skill tree that makes it so when we hold block and light attack at the same time, it recharges our mana up instantly. And that's why our skill tree leaves the ice area over here and comes over to this node here in the necrotic tree. And we grab this one here, hold Q and then left click on PC. If you're on console, don't worry, the game will tell you exactly what you need to press as well. And it says, focus your mind to generate up to 50 mana per second on command. And you can come over and grab that passive anytime you feel like you're tired of being out of mana. You can grab it earlier or later. It's totally up to you. So you spend your mana and then you click that. Now it's going to leave you vulnerable while you're doing this, right? Because this is channeling. Anything could attack you while you're doing this, except for the fact that what you pressed right before you started doing that was your Frost Nova. So everything's frozen, nothing can attack you, and you have free reign to channel this ability, get your mana back, and to just do that on repeat as safe as can be. So here's what that looks like. Drop those. You can see the ability sucking them in. They can't even attack me really. They died before I got to do my Frost Nova. So this thing's doing a lot of damage. Like I mentioned, I would normally, you know, if they were more dangerous, I would freeze. And then while that guy's frozen there, getting killed by that ability, I can regenerate my mana. Okay, so for the first half of the game, your skill tree is going to look like this. You're going to start here and you're just going to work your way straight up and come to grab your Ice Blast ability and your Frost Nova as soon as possible. Pick up some passives that are going to buff that. That's these big circular nodes around here. These are buffing those abilities. And then work your way over here as soon as you're tired of running out of mana and grab Channeled Thoughts. Channeled Thoughts is what you can use to refill your mana up to full instantly anytime you're in the heat of battle. And then you just want to make sure you work your way over here to your Evoker specialization. This is where we're going to get our Ice Ultimate and our Ice Entropic Spear, right? These two big abilities that are clutch for this build. So you're going to grab all these passives as you can. Some of them don't unlock until 40, so you won't be able to get all of them right away, but just grab them when you can. And then finally, you're going to work your way down here to this area. And that's when you're going to spec out of these nodes right here, take those points out, and you'll put them here into this node and this node, and then you'll grab this section down here and grab this Ice Blast ability upgrade right here, a massive 50% increase in damage to barrier and armor for Ice Blast. That's huge. So we'll grab that at the very end of the build. So the final tree will look like this. I'll just go over it one time here. Sure you see every node. Here's this section, and then here's this section. Specialization section. This section here. Then this section. And then this section. And just in case it's useful, here's this view from out here. Okay, so that's how our skills are working, and that's how our rotation is working. As far as the ultimate goes, when you are fighting a boss, then you drop the ultimate, or when you're fighting something with a lot of health. You'll know it when you see it. It'll have an armor bar, and it'll be big and chunky looking. That guy's probably going to have a lot of health, and that's going to be a great time to drop your Vortex of Shadow on them once you have it. So that's how the abilities work and why they work. You know, we kind of explained the passives that are contributing to their success. Now let's talk about the gear that we're wearing to facilitate this and to improve it. Now, the gear in this game, you're kind of subject to what you find and when you find it, which means You won't have all of this gear right away, but you will have it. You will find some version of it. The game gives you duplicates of gear, since finding a duplicate of a piece of gear is how you make it go up in rarity. Like this one is epic, and if I want to make it legendary, I need to find another version of this. It combines them, and now it's a legendary piece of gear, and it unlocks that last stat. I've just been unlucky here. I have 99% of this game done, and I haven't found that last version of this, nor have I found the duplicates of my helmet. But I've got a ton of gear that I'm not using legendaried out, right? That's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. So why is this gear the ideal gear? Well, this first one says we are going to do increase of 25% chilled damage. Chilled is the cold dot that your cold abilities are going to put on the enemy. When you attack them with 2 out of your 3 abilities, they are going to chill them. So both your blast and your entropic sphere are going to chill enemies, and this is going to increase the chilled damage, that cold damage dot that's being put on them, that both slows them and hurts them. Now, the chilled duration is being increased by 25%. That's great. Then it's going to add 2 to the maximum stacks of chilled so that the dot can stack more times. And then finally, chilled enemies won't be able to dodge, which is going to be a nice quality of life there. Not that anything ever really dodges from us because they are frozen all the time, which is why I haven't minded too much not having that last one on this item. Now, the next one here, our chest piece, we're using Wanderer's Longcoat. Why? It's pretty clear, right? It does 15% extra cold damage. Just flat percent increase in cold damage is pretty huge. We get some cold resistance, which is fine. And then using a cold ability is going to cleanse all afflictions. So we're constantly curing ourselves of any afflictions we have every time we use a cold ability. That's huge. For our belt, this one's going to apply chilled to nearby enemies on potion use. And again, it's going to increase our cold damage by 15%, and it's going to deal 150 cold damage in an area on potion use. Also, it applies an additional chilled stack on use. So lots more chill stacks, lots more cold damage. It's pretty clear why we're using the belt, right? Then for our amulet, this one's a little different from the other ones that we've talked about. This one's going to increase our projectile ability damage. That's our entropic sphere, the big circle that floats towards the enemies. This thing is going to increase its ability damage by 20%. It's going to increase its damage against barriers by another 25%. That's the blue health bar over enemies that you have to eat through before you can start attacking their health. And then it's also going to give us 25 mana back when our projectile abilities hit an enemy over 15 meters away. And then finally, when a projectile ability deals a critical hit, 50% of our weak point damage is also added. So big crits there with this ability as well, thanks to adding our weak point damage. For our 2 rings that we're going to be wearing, one ring that I really enjoy using is called Last Resort. This is a unique ring, and it's the only unique I'm using in this build right now, but there's a few different uniques that you could easily slot into this build. I wouldn't say that any one piece of gear in this build is required to make this build function. Not even close. You can play this build with completely different gear. This is just sort of a min-maxed version of it, right? And so this one's really fun because each time you use an ability that hits an enemy, you gain 20% damage and you lose 20% of your resistances. And it stacks up to 10 times. I've tested it, so I know it goes up to 10 stacks, which means I'm getting 200% ability damage. My abilities are hitting for 200% more, but I've lost 200% of my resistances. So when something hits me when I have 10 stacks, it usually knocks me down to about 1 health instantly. So you got to play on your toes if you're going to use this item effectively. And this bonus, your stacks are reset if you defend an attack, like if you block it, or if you dodge. So you want to use your sprint to get out of enemy AoE and to get out of enemy range when you're using this. Now, the reason this item works so well is because you don't really have to defend or dodge with this build, right? Because as I mentioned, we're chain freezing things with our Frost Nova. They never get to move. They're either stuck in our entropic sphere, or they're being knocked down by our blast, or they're being frozen by our Frost Nova. So they never have a chance to attack us. The only time something has a chance to attack us is if it happens to be really far away and it's not being hit by one of these things, which gives us free reign to just chain cast our abilities, get those 10 stacks, and absolutely delete the enemy. The next item we're using here is our Band of Smoke. This is going to increase our cold damage by another 15%, so very clear why we're using it. Gives us some cold resistance, which is fine, and then it's going to give us another 20% cold ability damage, so buffing all of our cold ability damage. And then it's also going to give us 50% of all of our other damage type bonuses contribute to our cold damage bonus. For the weapon, we already touched on it. We're taking the Veil Seeker for its buff to our light attacks, because the only thing we're doing besides chain casting our abilities in combat while the enemies are frozen is light attacking in sets of 3, always in sets of 3. It's not worth light attacking unless you're going to light attack 3 times, because that's going to reset your cooldown. So you always want to do 3 light attacks if you do 1 light attack. And this buffs that 3rd round of our attacks, the final attack as it's called, significantly. Then for our orb and our dagger, these are the weapons you can have out out if you're not using your staff. So you can press swap weapon and it's going to pull out your orb and your dagger. So you can attack with the staff or the orb and the dagger. Now, the way that I've set this up is the orb and the dagger are for deleting enemy barriers and shields. So it's for our charged attacks. I've set these two items up to be good at doing just that. It's buffing the charged attack, since that's the idea behind these weapons here is we switch to these weapons when we want to take down something's shield or something's barrier really fast. So the orb is going to deal cold damage. It's going to increase our charged attack damage by 30%. It's going to give 25% damage versus chilled enemies. Everything we're fighting should always be chilled. It's going to also apply chill itself with our charged attacks. And then chilled stacks are going to reduce the enemy's cold resistance. So we can slap the enemy with this a few times, get those chilled stacks on them and reduce their resistance to cold, which we're doing loads up. That's the Winter's Breath. Then the dagger, the twist of the veil. This is going to increase our damage versus armor by 25%. It's going to cause 30% more charged attack damage, and we're going to gain enhanced damage whenever we break an enemy's armor. So we're going to get a buff that enhances our damage when we break their armor, which is exactly what we're switching to this weapon to do. So that works out really well. Enhanced damage now also grants us 25% damage versus armor and barrier. If there's any other enemies nearby that still have armor or barrier, we're going to decimate that as well. So that's kind of the idea behind the way I've been playing with this build. Is I use the staff for most things because I've got those light attacks, sets of 3, where that third one sends tons of orbs at the enemy and it decimates them. But if there's a couple of enemies in front of me that got a barrier or armor and I really want to take it down, I can switch to this and I can do some charged attacks on them. I am confident that you will find every piece of gear here. You just might not find it enough times to get it up to legendary unless you're a very thorough player, but you'll find it enough times to get it up to epic, get the purple version and the blue version, no problem. Very casually playing the game, I think you'll have no problem getting everything up to like purple. But this game brings the completionist out of you. It really does, because when you open up the map, it tells you you've got 10 out of 11 chests in here, 2 out of 2 of the big chests, statues, right? Done. And you're like, oh man, I'm missing a chest in here somewhere. And that chest is going to be what has the item that you're looking for to upgrade your staff or your chest armor or your ring that, you're trying to upgrade. And so it kind of compels you to go find the one that you didn't find. It also, on the map right here, you see the check mark. That means you open the chest. And so if you see a chest on the map without a check mark, you need to find out how to get to it. It's going to be locked behind a puzzle and you just got to figure it out. Or a lot of times it's locked behind the story. So you won't be able to get to it. Even though you can see the chest, you need a piece of the story to bring you back to the zone that breaks down the wall, that gives you access to that part of the zone. Because zones are unlocked in stages in this game. You'll come back to the same zone multiple times, 2, 3, 4 times. And each time you come back, more of the zone will become available for you to explore. So if you can't get to a chest, don't beat your head against the wall. Wait until the story brings you back here, or wait till another quest brings you back here, and then try again. Now, another thing you're going to be able to do in this game is enchant. And if any of these mechanics or any of these systems are confusing to you, please check out my complete beginner guide for this game. I'll link it in the description below. I'll have it pop up in the top right corner of the screen right now. Watch that video. It'll explain all these systems to you. If this is feeling overwhelming, just watch that video and it's going to simplify it all. It's going to explain it in great detail. But right now I'm just going to try to go over it quickly so as not to make this video take forever. But what we're going to do is for enchanting, that's what the stat down there is that says 15% affliction duration. So the enchants we're going to take on this build are 15% affliction duration on our helmet. On our orb, we're going to take 15% damage at high health, because whenever we're using this item, both us and our enemies are going to be at high health. For our necklace, we're going to take critical damage. So our crits are hitting harder. For our staff, we're going to take +1 to our light staff projectile count, because again, we're just looking to buff the light attacks with our staff. And then for our chest piece, we're going to go ahead and take 10% ultimate regeneration. And for our dagger here, the twist of the veil, we're going to take 15% charged attack damage, because that's exactly what we're doing when we pull this weapon out. And then for our rings, the first one, we're going to take 25% blast ability damage, because our ice blast is a blast ability. It's going to buff its damage. And our other ring, we're going to put 25% projectile ability damage, because our entropic sphere ability is dealing projectile damage. Now, our abilities can also be enchanted. So when we go to our ability section here, and for Frost Nova, we're going to go ahead and put applies chill on hit. And this is going to apply the chill effect on the enemies, which is going to slow them and it's going to dot them up. So they're going to take ticking damage over time. From this, we're putting that on Frost Nova because our other two abilities already apply chilled themselves. For Ice Blast, we're going to go ahead and take the minus 15% cooldown duration so that we can cast it more often, right? So we do our light attack 3 times in a row, and this cooldown is basically a reset because of the gear and the enchants that we're wearing. And then for our Entropic Sphere, we are going to take 100% radius growth. So it's going to get bigger, faster. And that's basically everything we're doing with this ability, is making it bigger and making it hit harder so that it's doing more damage and it's hitting everything on your screen. So that's what we're doing with our enchants. Of course, with your upgrades, you're just going to always keep them maxed out as high as you can. It looks like I need to find one single memento and I'll be able to upgrade this to tier 10 and all my gear will be nice and maxed out. Okay, for the companions, I really like to have one that can heal. So I typically go with Harding. She's got a really nice heal over time, the Soothing Potion, that you can throw onto yourself anytime you start losing health and it'll heal you back up to full. As far as my other companion goes, with this build, I really like to have one that can detonate weakened. Davrin here is one such companion. So what you would do is you would cast a spell like Ice Blast onto the enemy. You could do Entropic Sphere, but it takes time for it to explode. And it's the explosion at the end that casts weakened. So I typically use Ice Blast because it's an immediate damage burst. So we can click that onto the enemy and then we can combo it, which is going to detonate it. So the game tells you, if you're ever not sure what combos with what, the game's telling me and saying, hey, you've got combo opportunity here. So you click that and then it has an arrow pointing to the skill that you should use to combo with it. When I back out of this menu by pressing the same button that opened it up in the first place, my character is going to cast that ability and then he's going to combo it. And that's what that big explosion is right there that just decimated that enemy, right? So detonating is a huge source of damage in this game. You want to get used to using it. So one more time, I've weakened those enemies with my Entropic Sphere this time. And now I'm going to detonate this guy, jump on him with that skill. So he's going to hit him with his bird and then boom, there goes that explosion, doing nice AoE damage to everyone nearby. Now my health is low, like I mentioned, so I can have Harding drop this heal on me and look at that. She's going to throw that. It's a nice heal over time that's going to heal me back up to full. Between the two of them, you have a fantastic source of damage output and a fantastic source of survivability if your potions run out in the really long fights. There's some fights in this game that last upwards of 10 minutes, and it's really helpful to have a healer in the group with you for those fights. And if you want to make them easy, then put 2 healers in your group, because as much damage as the detonate's going to do with your companion, you're always going to be the primary source of damage anyway. So if you want to bring 2 healers in to make the hardest fights easier, that's what I would recommend doing. The last thing to be aware of is once you open up your attack wheel with your companions, you're not locked onto this one permanently. Over here, it tells you you can switch between your targets. So we can pick the one that we want to focus on. And so with a detonate ability, you'd typically want to do the guy that's in the middle of everybody, or one of the really thick guys that you know is going to take a long time to kill, like this guy here with a beefy shield. So, right, we know he's going to take a bit of work to get down, so we can go ahead and do this combo on him. There we go. Drop our sphere. And there they are. Look at that. This guy in the back was a paper mage, so he's dead too. Everybody's dead, and that's a nice way to use the combo between us and our companions. If I had taken damage, I could go ahead and drop that heal on myself. All right, guys, if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to ask them down in the comments below. I'll read them, I'll respond, and I'll try to keep them answered for you. As I mentioned before, if any of this was confusing, be sure to check out my beginner guide for this game. It's very thorough, it's a great guide, and it'll explain every system and every mechanic in great detail. It takes a lot of time. There's timestamps so you can jump around easily. Check that out. And aside from that, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, be sure to like and subscribe for more quality gaming content. And massive shout out to my YouTube channel members. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel in the big way you do. If you want to become a channel member, make sure to click the join button down below to see what the perks are, like behind the scenes footage, access to a private Discord channel where you can ask me anything, anytime, and more. If you're not sure what to do next, maybe check out one of these videos on screen right now. Hope to see you in the next one.